Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the March 10th, 2025 show. The April 4th Coalition's mission statement is, we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights, and we are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we try to put the emphasis on Article 23. And so I'm going to do the first one, Mike's going to do the second one, I'm going to do the third one, and Michael will do the fourth one. Unfortunately, it's just Mike and I today. Liz and Rachel and Susan all have previous engagements, so we're going to do the best we can. So, number one, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment.
Number two, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number three, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself, in herself, in his family and her family, an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection.
Number four, everyone has the right to form and join unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Thank you, Michael. And it seems, though, today we're in a situation where all these rights are under attack, that the newly elected regime has more or less declared war on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and especially on Article 23. People are being fired without cause. They're selling off our infrastructure, our government buildings. It's just a terrible state of affairs. But during all this, we just wanted to make note that on Saturday, March 8th, was International Women's Day. And I know it's only us two men here, but we wanted to give a little history. We have a video on the history of International Women's Day.
International Women's Day. International Women's Day takes place every year on the 8th of March to celebrate the achievements of women worldwide. The day is also used to recognize women who've made significant contributions to the advancement of their gender. International Women's Day was first celebrated on March 19 in 1911. 1 million women and men rallied in support of women's rights on that first International Women's Day. The United Nations officially supported International Women's Day to reflect on progress made, to call for change, and to celebrate acts of courage and determination by ordinary women who have played an extraordinary role in the history of women's rights. The 100th anniversary of International Women's Day in 2011 resulted in many celebrations around the world and brought a lot more attention to International Women's Day. Recently, the world has witnessed a significant change in society's thoughts about women's equality. Many from a younger generation may feel that most battles have been won for women, while many from the 1970s know that, unfortunately, women are still not paid equally to their male counterparts. Women are still not equally present in business or politics, and globally, women's education and health is worse than that of men. However, great improvements have been made. We do have female astronauts and prime ministers. Schoolgirls are welcomed into university. Women can work and have a family. Women have real choices. And so, each year, the world inspires women and celebrates their achievements. International Women's Day is an official holiday in many countries, including these here. The tradition sees men honoring their mothers, wives, girlfriends, colleagues, with flowers and small gifts. In some countries, International Women's Day has the equivalent status of Mother's Day, where children give small presents to their mothers and grandmothers. So, make a difference. Make every day International Women's Day. Do your bit to ensure that the future for girls is bright, equal, safe, and rewarding.
Well, you know, I've always had strong women in my life. I know that my grandmother, she was like the matriarch of our family, and my mother, whose birthday it is today, you know, she was a strong leader in our family in raising us. I have a beautiful wife who has worked hard all her life and raised 4 children. 3 of them are women, and they are trying to forge their way in this world. It's not as easy as it once was, and now I have 3 granddaughters. And I see a big challenge right now with the present administration and how they treat women. And there's a lot of people that are out to put women down, to keep women down internationally and here nationally. And I think that that's the wrong way to go. I think that we would learn a lot from the leadership of women. I think the people that we have presently in the White House demean women quite a bit. There's one video that the United Nations, it's just a minute long, the United Nations put it out for this year, and I just want to show what the United Nations put out for International Women's Day for this year.
What is power?
It's louder than a shout
and softer than a whisper. It's in every voice, leading us
through fear and fire. This is our power.
What is power? I am
power. We are power.
This year, no matter what happens,
we refuse to let anyone take our power.
Our voice.
Our rights.
Our opportunities.
This year, we
march forward.
For all of us.
It's true. Until all women and girls have that power, it diminishes our own power. It's not a zero-sum game. Now, I was looking, I have another video that, on a series, we talked about the regime that we have. They believe they're dictators. They do not hold the Constitution as something sacred in our country. They don't look at the Declaration of Independence or the Gettysburg Address even. You know, the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people, and it shall not perish from the face of the earth. So we're doing a series on So You Want to Be a Dictator. So we're going to go to part 2. We watched the first part last week. We're going to watch part 2 of You Want to Be a Dictator.
Hey, all work, no pleasure. I ain't here to make friends.
There's only one real step here. Lead a coup. Create the fall of the Republic. A coup, you say? How the hell do I do that? It's simple, really. Extremism, like tyranny, is born from self-interest and ambition. So let's have a look at the playbook of ambitious tyrants over history. For political insurrection, you've got a few options to follow. First, look to Caesar. Always look to Caesar. Over the years, he turned popularity and wealth into political influence, winning wars and gaining favour amongst the Roman people. His unfettered ambition ultimately led to his crossing of the Rubicon River, starting a brutal civil war and his eventual appointment as dictator. When in power, he bypassed all traditional institutions to consolidate his rule, centralizing decision-making and eroding the independence of the Senate. The die was cast. All Republican norms went out the window, and tyranny was born. He was the daddy of the game, but he wasn't the last. From Hitler's propagandist maneuvering to take over the National Socialist Party in 1933, to Saddam's brutal takeover of the Ba'ath Party in 1968, ambitious men usually rise through the ranks of government posts, capitalizing on the mistakes of their enemies to gain support through populace. Pro tip: make promises that are so ridiculous, people believe you must have a plan to achieve them.
I will prevent, and very easily, World War III, very easily.
Use your money, power, and influence to target and discredit opponents, turning their innocuous mistakes into massive threats to civil liberties. Sidebar: being a man here massively increases your odds. Women rarely get a crack at the tyrant's whip. Honourable mention goes to Indira Gandhi, who ruled India from 1960 to 1980. She came to power through nepotism, declaring a state of emergency in 1975 and suspending all civil liberties and arresting all opposition. This worked for her, but unless your daddy is already in charge, this probably won't work for you. And yeah, this is mainly a boys' club.
Fuck.
The military route follows a similar pattern. Franco in Spain, Pinochet in Chile, and Erdogan in Turkey are just some examples. All used the military to seize power, claiming it was necessary to stabilize the country amidst political violence. The main issue here is that you kinda need to be in the military, and I, for one, am not getting up at 6 AM to do push-ups in the mud.
God damn it, Trump! You're a goddamn genius!
But if you can hack the 10 tuna breakfasts and 5 AM 10Ks, good for you, mate.
8 o'clock in the morning, I'll have fish and a rice cake. At 10 o'clock, I'll have fish. At 12 o'clock, I'll have fish and a rice cake.
Build a reputation and rise through the ranks over the years, eliminating your enemies as you go. Once at the top, build connections in government and start inserting the military into more and more of everyday political life, until the line between the military and civilian rule seems arbitrary to most people.
The Trump administration is now sending active duty troops to the southern border just days after President Trump declared a national border emergency.
Lastly, there's the guerrilla route. This looks best on a t-shirt, but it's also the riskiest. Fidel Castro was a revolutionary all his life, bouncing from revolts in the Dominican Republic at the age of 21 to Bogota in 1948. His revolution, the movement, attempted a coup in 1953, which failed, and led to him being sentenced to 15 years in prison. What's wild here is that his coup was actually a coup against Batista's coup a year earlier in 1952, which shows that not all coups are created equal. But hey, if it was easy, everyone would coup it. Sorry. Luckily for Castro, his popularity led to public pressure, which caused for him to be freed in 1955, where he fled to Mexico before returning 4 years later with the Che Guevara-backed army and taking over the country. After 3 years of guerrilla warfare. Again, this is very much the hard way. Coups come in all shapes and sizes, and can range from years to decades. There are of course some other ways to gain power, i.e. buying votes through elections, but honestly this usually takes too long and it's not really that reliable. But congrats, you've made it to the top. Your coup worked.
A coup that's worked, unfortunately. And now what we have to do is organize to somehow regain control of our society. You know, we have to stand up for those people that are being attacked, because even though it's not us that's being attacked right now, if we don't stand up with those whose jobs are being cut or who's being deported without just cause, it will be us or our family members next. So how do we learn what to do? Well, in keeping with the International Women's Day last Saturday, We have an example, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Maria Ressa, who has dual citizenship in the Philippines and in the United States, and she sort of has experience. So let's look at what PBS did an interview with Maria Ressa, and it'll give you a little background on what it's like to live under a coup.
Nobel Peace Prize laureate and investigative journalist Maria Ressa has long fought for global press freedom. Her book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, detailed her experience running the news site Rappler under the increasingly autocratic regime of President Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines. She recently sat down with Amna Navas to discuss parallels she's seeing between the Philippines and the U.S. under President Trump. It's part of our new series on democracy, which focuses on the laws, institutions, and norms that have shaped this country and the challenges they face today.
Maria, welcome back to the NewsHour. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So there's been a lot of concerns you've seen about President Trump's continuing attacks on the press and concerns about a loss of press freedom. I want you to start by just comparing what you lived through, what you documented, what you covered under Duterte with what we've seen in the first several weeks of this second Trump administration so far.
It's exactly what we've lived through, except accelerated. It's incredible how fast it's going, and part of that is organization, right? But what we did in the Philippines is within 6 months, the Constitution of the Philippines is patterned after the United States. We have 3 branches of government and a powerful executive. But within 6 months of the election of Rodrigo Duterte, of him taking office, all of the checks and balances had collapsed. He was an all-powerful, the most powerful leader the country had ever known. And critical to that, crucial to that, is silencing the press and the justice system, the court system, right? And I think that's what we're beginning to see right now.
Let me ask you about a few individual things we've seen. You've obviously seen the president go after specific news networks. He's also opened a probe into PBS, we should note. He's also blocked access for the Associated Press, known as the AP, for their refusal to call it just the Gulf of America as he wants. They call it the Gulf of Mexico and say he wants to change the name. Now, the AP, we should note, serves thousands of news organizations. They have a reporter in every single state house in America, hundreds of countries, rather over 100 countries across the world. What does it say to you that he's going after the AP? What's at stake in their lawsuit against the president here?
It's not just press freedom that's at stake, right? And again, let me ground it first in what happened in the Philippines. Our president then went after the largest newspaper, the largest television station, and then online. We were the largest. We were number 3. But go big, go fast, take them down quickly, make an example. I was the example of a journalist. I had, oh my gosh, a long career. I had headed the largest network in the Philippines after almost 20 years with CNN. And then when the charges came, so first social media, that tax came bottom up. You say a lie a million times, it becomes a fact. And it was that journalist equals criminal. 2 years before I was actually arrested, they trended that, the network that was created online, so the propaganda. Then a year later, we had the first criminal charges, 21 of them, and then by 2 years later, by 2019, I was arrested. And then it was 10 criminal charges in a little over a year. Look, what you're seeing is death by 1,000 cuts of democracy. This is exactly what I had written about in the book. And originally, I was speaking to Filipinos, but it is a cautionary tale for every democracy where technology is the spark that allows populism to become authoritarianism and to shift over. I think we're seeing this now.
So if the press is under attack here, Maria, as an observer watching this all unfold, what do you make of the way that the press has responded? In particular, the fact that there's been a major news organization in ABC that's already settled a lawsuit with the president. It's reported that CBS would likely do the same. What do you make of that?
Don't voluntarily give up your rights, right? I mean, again, I'll give you our example in the Philippines, where the newspaper gave up, the television station gave up, it lost its franchise or license to operate. And guess what? It never regained it, even after the time of Duterte. Little Rappler, with about 100, 120 people, we stood up. And, you know, it was difficult, it was frightening, but we're still here, right? A point in time when I faced over a century in jail, but I'm still here. And after 2021, I had lost some of my rights. I wasn't allowed to travel, for example, but now here I am. I'm in New York City teaching at Columbia University, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, hold the line is the phrase we use because it's connected to the rights that you deserve as a citizen. And if you do not hold the line at this crucial moment, this is the moment when you are strongest. You will only get weaker over time. And it isn't just the journalists, because journalists are the front lines in this, but the question is to every single citizen in America. It's the question I threw in the book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator. And that question is simple. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? Because if you don't have facts, you cannot, and I've said this over and over since 2016, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these, we have no shared reality. You can't solve any problem, let alone existential ones like climate change. You can't have journalism. You can't have democracy. And in a system like that, only a dictatorship wins.
Maria, you're drawing the comparisons here based on your lived experience, of course. But there are folks who will say, look, the U.S. is not the Philippines. Trump is not Duterte. Our democracy is not the same as the one that you lived in. What do you say to that? The idea that this is somehow immune, our system, from the same things that the Philippines fell prey to?
I think I have two ways to respond to that. The first is, it isn't just the Philippines. There is a dictator's playbook, and you can look first at Russia. Actually, even before that, Turkey, Hungary, Russia, right, with Putin taking office. And the first step is really to get elected, once you're elected, to crush the systems of checks and balances and then replace them with your own. We're starting to call them the broligarchy because it's far more potent. The tech guys are more potent than just normal oligarchies. This is political largesse, political patronage. You have to decide the world you want to live in. You have to decide whether rule of law exists. You cannot normalize impunity. And if you don't, over time, we normalize that and you lose more and more of your rights. But here's a positive note. Rodrigo Duterte's term ended. He had one 6-year term. He did try to extend, and perhaps if the military had supported him, I wouldn't be here. But we now have another president, and those 10 criminal cases that I've had, I've now won 8 of those 10, and 2 left. I still have to ask the Supreme Court for approval to travel, but we're here. It's alarming to see it happening all over again.
We should point out, Maria, that the majority of Americans say they don't even trust the media right now, that we've seen a decline in that trust over years, and many people like to see the president go after the press in the way that he does. They will hear this conversation and say, good, I'm glad he's doing what he's doing. What has the independent press ever done for me? What would you say to them?
The role of journalists in a country, in a democracy like the Philippines, like the United States, is to hold power to account. And I believe that that is why, I mean, you're not going to have an influencer or a content creator stand up to a dictator. You're not going to have someone have a set of principles, of standards and ethics that actually pushes against their own self-interest. We're seeing all of these begin to fall, but here's the thing. Part of what triggered that is the technology, the public information ecosystem we live in. Journalists and news organizations have been under attack from the very beginning. So your lack of faith in that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You lose journalism the way we practice it. You lose democracy.
Maria Ressa, always such a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for making the time.
Well, that's an amazing fact. Only 8% of the world lives under a free press situation. I like what she had to say about we're strongest now at this moment. So we have to stand up at this time to defend our institutions. We had scientists picketing in Washington and all over the world. They're eliminating jobs in science. They're attacking our healthcare system. It's just, they're trying to be overwhelming in such a short amount of time. And it's a very dangerous situation. What we have to do is we have to stand up for truth and facts and the rule of law. Now, we have one more video. It's Fareed Zakaria about how not only domestically are things being overturned, but internationally too. So let's listen to what Zarim Fakhari had to say in his report.
Singapore plays its geopolitical cards carefully as a country that tries to maintain good relations with America in a region dominated by China. So it's worth paying attention when its defense minister says that the image of the United States has changed from liberator to great disruptor to a landlord seeking rent. Its senior minister, Lee Hsien Loong, summed up the challenge the world faces. The U.S. is no longer prepared to underwrite the global order. This makes the international environment far less orderly and predictable. In a few short weeks, the Trump administration has effected a revolution in foreign policy. It has largely abandoned a long-standing democratic ally, Ukraine, whose security the U.S. has pledged to uphold since signing the Budapest Memorandum 30 years ago. In fact, it now asks for a big share of Ukraine's mineral wealth, which the administration describes as payback for American support. Meanwhile, Washington declared a tariff war on its neighbors and closest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, and demanded that Denmark sell it Greenland and Panama hand over the Panama Canal. It has moved to withdraw from the World Health Organization, which the U.S. helped found. It has tried to shutter most of its foreign aid programs to the world's poor, reversing a tradition of generosity that dates back to World War I. Its tariffs are clear violations of trade rules that Washington itself created and championed for decades. These remarkable turnarounds are being noticed around the world and will result in a revolution in foreign policy everywhere. Friedrich Merz, the man who is likely to become Germany's next chancellor, said recently, "My absolute priority will be to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible so that step by step we can really achieve independence from the USA." I never thought I would have to say something like this, but after Donald Trump's statements, it is clear that the Americans, at least this part of the Americans, this administration, are largely indifferent to the fate of Europe. Germany stood at the center of the security system the US built after World War II. For that country to start shaking is a seismic shift. Merz has even raised the idea of France and Britain extending their nuclear umbrella to Germany because he's no longer convinced that the US would defend his country. That American promise was the essence of NATO, but no one in Europe knows if Trump would actually honor it. People in Taiwan have watched nervously as the Trump administration has turned on Ukraine. And rather than offering support against the predatory intentions of Taiwan's bullying neighbor, Trump has berated Taiwan for not spending enough on its own defense. Many on the island now worry that Trump might make a deal with Beijing that leaves them abandoned, like Ukraine. All these American moves will have an effect. They will begin to usher in a new multipolar world. Major countries like Germany and Japan will inevitably look out for their own security. That could mean, for Japan as well as for South Korea, nuclear weapons become an attractive option, an insurance policy against aggression. Under the US security umbrella, the world has seen remarkably little nuclear proliferation. That could change dramatically. Every country will consider how to wean itself off dependence on the US. As countries seek independence from the US, they might also seek alternatives to the dominance of the dollar. Europeans, who are really the only ones who could mount an alternative, might start issuing EU bonds, which would be the most effective competitor to US Treasury bonds. America's exorbitant privilege of owning the world's reserve currency, which has allowed it to run up massive deficits at low cost, might erode faster than we could imagine. All these changes are gifts to Russia and China, whose goal has been to weaken America's power and presence in the world. As one Russia analyst said recently on GPS about Trump's Ukraine policy,
it's indeed like Easter, Hanukkah, Christmas, birthday of Vladimir Putin, and everything is happening on one day.
To those who think it's high time that we changed an international system that was so dependent on the US, have you weighed the costs and benefits? The United States has spent 8 decades building an international system of rules, norms, and values that has produced the longest period of great power, peace, and global prosperity in human history. Its alliances are the greatest force multiplier for American influence around the world. And America has been the greatest beneficiary of this system, even now, decades later, setting the agenda and dominating the world economically, technologically, militarily. As this world unravels, America's privileged position will also decline, creating a more dangerous and impoverished world and a more isolated, mistrusted, and insecure America. The post-American world is now in plain sight. Go to cnn.com/Fareed for a link to my Washington Post column this week.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's a very solemn time. All we can say is power to the people. You know, get involved and get active within your community. Talk to your neighbors, and just remember, power to the people.
Power to the people.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The strikes of the bosses we must fight for.